Thank you, Ray, for the very kind introduction, and good morning to all of you. So, as Ray said, today's talk will be about willpower, very different from all the other talks that you've heard today in the IT sphere. Scientists tell us that there are two virtues that will influence more than any other thing our success in life. The first one is our innate talent and intellect, and the second one is our willpower. Unfortunately, there is very little we can do about our innate IQ. It is what it is, and it's very hard to change it during the course of our life. But about willpower, we can do a lot, and that's what I'm going to share with you today. And it all started about a year ago when I got a call from Dr. Liat Kuzniar, a naturopathic physician based out of New Jersey in the US. She also happened to be my daughter. And she says, "Daddy, I have a problem and I need your help. For the last couple of months, I've been thinking about putting together a wellness program. I want to capture, consolidate, crystallize all that I've learned in my 10 years of practice, and I want to make it available to people who are serious about improving the wellness of their life. But there is one thing that I'm missing, and that's where I need your help," she says. And that is many, if not most, of my patients are telling me that's what's failing them in their attempts to change their life is willpower, or the lack thereof. So, Daddy, she says, will you help me sort this willpower thing, understand it, grasp it, and find some approach and some solution to it? And with that started our journey for the last year or so into the science of willpower, understanding what it is, how it works, and how we can make use of it. And that's what I want to share with you today. So one of the first things we found through our research is that survey by the American Psychological Association that says 31% of the 2,000 odd people they surveyed said that their challenge in meeting their change goals, their wellness goals, is the lack of willpower. So that, in fact, corroborated my daughter's finding in her own practice. But then we went deep into studying tens and tens of peer-reviewed papers, books, all about the topic of the science of willpower. And we consolidated all of these into 6 interventions that I want to share with you today. For each one of these interventions, I will discuss the science behind them, what experiment scientists did and what they found. Then I will describe how you can use this intervention on a personal level to make the best use of it. And finally, I will do something that I haven't done before. I've been giving these talks for about 6 months now. But this here will be the first time where I'll take it to the next level and share with you ideas on how you can use these interventions at the corporate level. So these interventions are the willpower muscle, mindfulness, laying the foundation for change, the habit loop, surf the urge, which I'm sure you'll find interesting, and then the accountability partner. So let's start with the willpower muscle. What is willpower? Scientists have looked into willpower over the last 20 years or so and understood through the advent of fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging technology, that our willpower sits in what they call the prefrontal cortex area of our brain, which is situated right here, marked in red in this picture. And it is in that particular area of the brain that controls what we do and what we don't do. In fact, it controls all these functions: long-term planning, complex problem analysis and solving, situational assessment, emotional integration, motivation, short-term memory, working memories they call it, attention management, a host of functions, all which scientists call the executive function of our brain, sitting right here. What neuroscientists in the last 5 years or so have also been able to identify an area of the brain called, a mouthful, the orbital frontal cortex, which is an area sitting right on top of our eye sockets. And it is that area that actually directly within the prefrontal cortex controls what we do and what we don't do. The left side of the orbitofrontal cortex is responsible for initiating action, and the right side is responsible for inhibiting action. So, how can we control our willpower? Can we control our willpower? Can we use it to improve our lot in life, as scientists tell us that we can? And so Professor Roy Baumeister is the foremost leader in the area of willpower out of the University of Florida State. And he's done for the last 20 years a lot of research in this area. And he tells us two main things about willpower. Number one, willpower is a depletable resource. We have a certain amount of it in the morning, where we are fresh after a good night's sleep and a healthy breakfast. And over time, that resource depletes. So towards the evening hours, we have a lot less of it. The second thing is that if we exercise that willpower muscle and keep it fit at all times, it actually comes to serve us and to help us in better control our lives and apply a higher degree of rational thinking, which is brought along by the prefrontal cortex, over our emotional reactions to whatever situations life presents us with. So let's look at those two factors. This is an interesting study that was conducted in Israel, where the researchers looked at the rulings of a parole board over a period of 10 months and about 1,100 different rulings that particular board did over that period. And what they found is that the rate at which the board awarded the paroles to those prisoners, first thing in the morning, was about 70%. Then it started going down, irrespective of the case and the merits of the case, to about 0 just before the morning break. And after they had their coffee and 15-minute break and perhaps something to eat, it shot back to 65% or so, and again down to almost 0 towards lunchtime. And researchers, those Israeli researchers, as well as Roy Baumeister and others, have looked at why is it so? What is happening in the brains of those judges that is influencing their decisions over any other factors? And it's just the luck of the draw of the prisoner, where he came in the stack first thing in the morning or first thing after the morning break, or just before lunchtime, in which he might spend another 5 years in prison. So what they found is that those deliberations and decision makings that those judges had to perform require a lot of mental energy. And the brain derives its energy from glucose. It does not store energy in its own right. Like other parts of our body, we have the fat available to us. The brain only gets its energy through the glucose that comes with the blood flow. With the passage of time, the level of glucose drops, and the mental energies available to us to perform highly complex mental tasks like those judges had to do is depleted. So what do we learn from that? We learn from that we have to be very mindful of situations where we're tasking our brain with critical decision making, critical analysis, critical negotiations to not do those kinds of things and plan for those kinds of decision makings at a time when we know our mental energies will be depleted. And in fact, the Japanese use this very same knowledge in their negotiating techniques. They will get their guests from the US or wherever else into a room, close the door and say, gentlemen, we're not leaving this room until we're reaching an agreement. Meanwhile, the Japanese will sneak out of the room one by one, quietly, take a 10-minute break, have a coffee, have something to eat, and come back to the room. But the guests, no. They had to sit there throughout hours and hours and hours of negotiation until their mental energies were completely depleted, and at that time, the Japanese knew that they had the upper hand. So the lesson here for us at the individual level as well as the organizational level, plan your activities based on this particular knowledge of how our brain behaves and how our willpower is so dependent on the energy level of our brain. And the second one is that the willpower is just like a muscle. It can be developed and kept fit. And those are the 5 interventions that we can take to help us keep a fit willpower. The first 4 are obvious. Sleeping well, reducing the stress level, exercising, and a healthy diet. But it is this last one, exercising the willpower, which I'd like to discuss with you a little bit. And how this works is as follows. You take simple tasks as a challenge that you know you stand a fairly high chance of mastering them and habitualizing them. And you practice them for a period of time until they become completely automatic. And then you go to the next one and the next one. And that exercise of challenging yourself with those kinds of exercises will improve the fitness of your willpower. So for example, the first thing I've done after I read this research was to move the mouse on my computer to the left hand. Initially, it was very awkward for about the first 2 weeks, and I always wanted to pull it apart and bring it back to where it belongs. But after a while, I mastered it. The next thing I did is started brushing my teeth with my left hand. I don't know if you've tried, my non-dominant hand. And at the beginning, again, it was awkward, and I would hit my gums in all directions, and I will hurt myself. But after a while, I mastered this one as well. And then I took on dishwashing with my left hand. It cost us a couple of plates, but it worked in the end. The last one I've tried, this one is a little more risky, is shaving with my non-dominant hand. In the beginning, I had some bloody accidents, but this morning, as you can see, I shaved with my left hand and my face is still intact. So the idea here is select your simple exercises that you know you stand a high chance with good practice and dedication to master, and then be on target, focus on them for a period of time until they become a habit. So how can we do this at the organizational level? So let's say, for example, you want your team to not exceed 50 words in their emails. Because as you well know, some of us tend to write War and Peace in our emails. So you institute this new habit, publicize it amongst your team, ask them to practice this on a regular basis. The social pressure of the team itself will also help. And after a while, if you maintain sufficient focus on this, you'll start noticing that the team is beginning to master this new behavior. Similarly, if you want your team to not hit reply all, but just reply the individual that they intend to receive the reply message, same thing. Or in fact, any other habit that you would like the team to master. And after doing this, habit after habit, you'll find that the willpower, self-discipline, focus, determination of your team is improving by the day. So this is about the willpower muscle. Let's move now to the second topic, which is mindfulness. Mindfulness has been popularized in the West by a guy called Dr. John Kabat-Zinn. I think he started these mindfulness exercises in 1979, so it's been a while. But in the last 10 years or so, it became very, very popular. And so what is mindfulness meditation or mindfulness practice? It's the art of being in the present moment, right now, at all time, accepting the now for what it is, with openness and curiosity, and with as little judgment as possible. And neuroscientists have found that the brain structures, the neural connections, and in fact, even new neurons were being generated by long-term meditators. So the Dalai Lama himself sponsored a group of Tibetan monks to come to the US to lie down in an fMRI machine. I don't know if you've seen pictures of those. These are huge machines that you lie down in. And the neuroscientists created images of those Tibetan monks who've been meditating for 20,000 hours in their lifespan. And what they found is that the brain structures of those monks are significantly different from yours and mine. And all of that for one reason, their long-term meditation. But even what's more interesting is that those same scientists found that even after 8 weeks of daily meditation, the brain structures of regular people, like you and me, started to change. So you don't need to meditate for 20,000 hours and sit somewhere in a Tibetan temple for a lifetime, but you can start seeing those benefits even within a period of 8 weeks. So what I'd like to invite you to do now is to do a short 1-minute mindfulness meditation practice using a technique that I've learned 2 weeks ago from a Japanese Buddhist monk at Echo Temple on top of Mount Koya, south of Osaka in Japan. Please sit comfortably in your chairs, but erect. Your hands comfortably on your lap or wherever else it's comfortable for you. When I say go, close your eyes, please. And then concentrate fully and solely on your breathing. Breathe in and out through your nose and try and focus entirely on the sensation that breathing is creating, the airflow in and out through your nostrils, your abdomen, your chest, and try and focus on nothing else but your breathing. Thoughts will come and go through your minds. That's okay and natural. Don't try to resist them, forcefully trying to remove them. Accept them, let them pass, and then gently bring your attention back to your breathing. Okay? So 1, 2, 3, go for 1 minute. Okay, the 1 minute is up. Please gently bring your attention back to the front. And I want to take just 1 minute to ask some of you, what was your experience like? Particularly the extent to which you were able to maintain that focus on your breathing only, or you had other thoughts coming in, flowing in and out of your minds. Anyone would like to share? Thank you. So the breathing got slower as the minute progressed. Also, the sounds from the air conditioning switching on became more apparent and more present. And then the awareness of and the concern that the cell phone will start buzzing during the meditation. These are the experiences. One more? Anyone? Okay. So what does this meditation do to our brain? Scientists very recently, actually as late as 2013-14, found that this ability to focus on objects of our choosing, namely our breathing, the noises around, but to focus on one particular item for an extended period of time, and by that I mean maybe 30 minutes or so, changes the structure of the brain and makes those structures of the prefrontal cortex more dominant over the emotional drives that we experience at all times. So, of course, this will also help us with our willpower and situations in which we want to control those emotions and we want our rational thinking to dominate. So, in the last 12 years or so, neuroscientists found that there are 6 areas of our brain that are marked here 1 to 6, that when we are not focused on a particular task, like solving a Sudoku, reading a book, writing a report, whatever it might be, when we are not focused on a particular task, those 6 areas light up and start firing intensely. Whereas when we start focusing on a task, whatever it might be, those areas quiet down, and then the other regions of our brain start firing, like the prefrontal cortex that we mentioned before. So what are those areas doing at times when we are not concentrating on a particular mental task? And scientists found that there are 4 default mode activities, as they call them, that the brain is engaged in when we are not focused on some specific task. And these are, first of all, situational assessment. So we cast judgment on everything that's happening around us and the people that are happening around us as the first priority when we're not focusing on a specific thing. So for example, we sit in a meeting and the meeting is run by someone that is really lost control over the meeting, and what is this guy Jack doing? He doesn't know how to run his meetings, we're not achieving, we're wasting our time, and the room is hot anyway. Those kinds of judgments. And typically they are negative. They are negative because the brain is pre-wired, hardwired, to protect ourselves and elevate ourselves relative to everything that's around us. So those judgments of the default mode activity, the situational assessment, are typically negative. And of course they're useless. They're completely unproductive. The second one is time traveling. So we either ruminate about the past, what happened today, we wish it didn't happen this way, I could have, I should have, or time traveling to the future and trying to hypothesize what might happen, running different scenarios in our mind. And again, most of those activities are completely useless, they're not productive at all, but they require a lot of mental energy. The third one is self-image cultivation, and we spoke about this. So we'd like to think of ourselves as I am the person who always knows everything about anything, or always has to win an argument, or always have to get the best deal, or whatever it might be. And that self-image that we have of ourselves, we have to cultivate it. Again, we are pre-wired that way. So we spend a lot of time cultivating our self-image, and if reality doesn't behave according to our expectations of our self-image, we get either irritated, frustrated, or demotivated, and sometimes even depressed. And the last one is social referencing. It's very important to us, to different extents, depending on personality, what the people around us, especially those important to us, think of us, and think of what we do, and what we say, and how we dress, and how we carry ourselves, and all these kinds of things. So we spend time in a social referencing activity, again, when we're not focused on a specific task, when the brain engages in these default mode activities. And the benefits of mindfulness meditation is, over time, these default mode activities quieten down. And again, researchers have been able to see in Tibetan monks or long-term meditators in general that their default mode activities are quieter than in regular non-meditators. So the intervention here is very simple. 30 minutes a day, that's all you need to do. And in fact, researchers say that even 2 or 3 minutes, or even 5 minutes before you get to an important meeting, or before you get to something important to you, even 5 minutes, or when you want to take a break, 5 minutes would also help. But the prerequisite, like the minimum to start seeing a sustainable effect in your brain, is 30 minutes a day, and after 8 weeks of doing this, you yourself will start noticing differences in how you react to your environment. In the organizational setting, it would take a little more determination and courage, but one thing you can do is start lunchtime meditation sessions in your company. Select a room dedicated once a week to lunchtime meditation or more. Bring a mindfulness meditation instructor or guide, and bring your team in and invite them to join. And at first, you might have only 2 or 3 people interested, but the word will go around, and you'll start seeing this benefit on your team. And then if you want to take it even a step further, start every meeting with a 2-minute mindfulness meditation. Just 2-minute quiet, everyone sitting down, doing what we've just done here, and then starting your meeting. And again, you will see the benefit, measurable, noticeable. If you do a survey of your team before and after 2 months of doing this, you will start seeing the difference. So next one, laying the foundation for change. And again here, I'll discuss it on a personal level and then on an organizational level. So here is the time after we've strengthened our willpower, we've done mindfulness meditation to focus on our specific goals, that specific thing that we want to achieve. And you've seen all these questions: what is the goal, what is the timeline, make it smart, specific, measurable, and so on, time-bound. Here is the time to ask yourself all these questions and consider them in great detail, and in fact, write them down. If you're so inclined, like typically I think better in writing, and if you like that, then definitely I would recommend, whatever your goal might be, to write it down. This way, a year later, if you suddenly find out that that goal completely vanished from your life, you can go back to your journal, change journal, and ask yourself, what was I thinking a year ago? Why did I ever adopt this goal? Didn't make sense, doesn't make sense today, maybe it made sense a year ago. At the organizational level, the questions will be somewhat different, but again, you get your team together, and whether it is a new cultural behavior that you want to adopt within your team, or whether it is a project or an operational improvement, like paying more attention to detail within the team, or being more creative, or more risk-taking, whatever it might be, write down that change that you want your team to adopt, and write down a list of questions that you want to deeply consider before you undertake that goal. So that's fairly trivial, and I don't want to spend too much time on it. I want to get onto the habit loop. So typically, there are two types of goals that we might want to adopt. One is a long-term goal, like education, career goals, financial goals, and in the company setting, operational goals, or projects or programs, like we heard from Mitch before, that we want to implement. And the second one is habitual goals. We want to create a new behavior either at the personal level or at the organizational level. So since quite a few of our goals could be habitual, I'd like to spend some more time here understanding what are habits and how can we control them, if we can. So what are habits? Habits are what scientists call automated, non-conscious behaviors. So once we mastered the habit, it sinks down in our brains to a system of the brain called the basal ganglia, and it is packaged there as a set of steps that together constitute that habit. And once it sinks into the basal ganglia, it only needs a trigger, and then the entire habit is executed at once. So we don't need the conscious involvement of step 1, step 2, step 3. So, for example, learning how to ride a bike, why is it a non-declarative memory or a procedural memory? Is try to explain to someone who's never ridden a bike how to maintain your balance on the bike. And you'll find it very difficult to explain, and your student will find it very difficult to practice based on your explanation. That has to be practiced enough, and once you get the hang of it, so to speak, that new skill set sinks deep into the structures of your brain, and then it becomes unconscious. You don't know that you have to lower the one leg and bring up the other and change the angles of your feet. All of that is completely done unconsciously. So this is what habits are, And this is how they sink deeply into the structures of our brain. So in 1993, one of the foremost leaders in the area of habit, Dr. Wolfram Schultz, he conducted a study with macaque monkeys. He took 3 macaque monkeys and set them up in a chamber, experimental chamber, that had 3 things in it. It had a display screen, it had a lever that the monkeys could press, like the one we see over there, and it had a reward release mechanism that would release sweet cranberry juice the moment the monkeys pressed the bar, the lever. And then he started flashing those cues on the signal, on the display monitor. And after a day or 2 or 3, the monkeys started to learn that if the yellow signal appears on the screen, and if at the same time or immediately thereafter they press the lever, they will get a dose of their beloved juice. And after a while, that became a completely automated behavior. Then what Schultz did, and we know Pavlov's dogs and so on, but what he was able to do as early as about 20 years ago is put electrodes deep into the brain structures of those monkeys and measure exactly what were the neural activities that were happening in those structures. And what he found is, at the beginning, the level of dopamine in the dopamine neurons, in the reward centers of the brain, the dopamine level will shoot up the moment they tasted the sweet juice. But later on, once they've acquired the habit, the dopamine level will shoot up the moment they saw the cue, not the moment they actually tasted the juice. So at that point, the behavior had become completely habitualized. So what scientists were thinking is, well, if this is how it works, we have a cue, we have a behavior, we have a reward. If we remove the cue and the reward, is the behavior going, will it die? Will the neural connections that make up that behavior, will they completely disappear? And to their surprise, they found out that that is not the case. Much like you don't forget how to ride a bike, even if you have not done that for 20 years, you get onto the bike, and with a little bit of practice, you're back as new. Those old networks, neuronal networks that collectively form that habit, they never die. So even if you don't have exposure to the cue or the reward, those networks are still sitting dormant within your basal ganglia. And sadly, we know from so many stories of addicts that have been successfully, completely rehabilitated. And then all it takes is one drive past their favorite bar or their favorite casino or whatever it might be, and then the habit is back just like that. And there is no mental control, or very little mental control, that they can exercise to overcome that, because those neural connections are sitting in their brain, primed, ready to go the moment you see the cue again. So how can we use this knowledge of what scientists call this habit loop? You see the cue, you do the behavior, you get the reward, you develop a craving. How can we use that to overcome undesired habits or adopt new habits? So here is a completely hypothetical situation at the organizational level. And let's assume that your meetings are really not effective. They start late. People always wonder, 5-10 minutes after the start time. They end late. People jump into each other's speech. They interrupt each other. They go off at a tangent, speaking on unrelated topics. At the end of the meeting, people are wondering what had been achieved by the meeting. Nobody knows what the action items are and by whom and by when. Really, those meetings are a mess, and your objective is, perhaps you're a newcomer to the organization, is to really improve the effectiveness of those meetings. So how would you do it knowing the habit loop principles and concepts? So the first thing is you will design the desired behavior. And that could be like starting on time, ending on time, speaking in turn, and so on. And you'll write some kind of meeting etiquette or meeting procedure that you want your team to adopt. And then you will have some cues, some reminders. So a countdown clock, some electronic reminders to your team. You will appoint a meeting marshal. You'll start monitoring and measuring specifically on-time starts, on-time finished, speech interruptions, and all these things that you want to habitualize. And after a while, you'll start noticing that those behaviors are becoming habitualized in the team. Of course, you'll have to add some rewards, so maybe you'll do a draw of a cruise on the Royal Caribbean or something else, and that will possibly incentivize. At the personal level, you definitely have to design a reward. At the organizational level, you have to design a reward as well. Perhaps it won't be a cruise, will be something else. But you can definitely use this concept of the habit loop both at the personal and at the organizational level. And using this knowledge, you can implement new cultural ideas, cultural traits and habits and so on within your organizations. So basically, how do you overcome an existing habit? First of all, you have to really deeply understand what is the habit, what is the behavior you want to overcome, and what are the constituent components. How does it physically happen? And then design an alternate behavior. Knowing that you're not going to be able to kill those neural connections, you have to bypass them in some way. So once you know what it is now and what you would like it to be, then understand the existing cue and find ways to bypass that cue and create another cue that will prompt the new behavior. Similarly, understand what the current, and really I'm saying deeply understand what the current reward is and what inner needs does that reward actually satisfy, and try and come up with a more powerful, stronger reward that will satisfy the same needs. And then we'll talk about the accountability partner in a moment. Highly recommended to engage someone that will help you, especially if the habit is challenging to overcome. Practice, and then periodically do a checkpoint. See how far you are progressing. So that summarizes the habit loop. And the next one is what behavioral scientists call surf your urge. And this intervention was popularized by Alan Mallard and Sarah Bowen out of Washington State University. And what they did is they took a group of university students that were all smokers who desperately wanted to stop their smoking habit. They told them, please do not smoke for 12 hours before the experiment, which I think was conducted in the afternoon, so it was a good number of waking hours that they could not smoke. Then they brought those, and they told them, bring an unopened pack of cigarettes and a lighter with you, got them into the room, and said, okay, now take your packs out. And you could see the students are all kind of on edge. They're really waiting for the moment that they can have the first smoke of the day. And the researcher says, okay, now stop. Look at your pack for 2 minutes. You're not allowed to touch it. You're not allowed to open it. Just during those 2 minutes, examine your emotion, examine your sensation, examine your thoughts, and write them down. Okay, 2 minutes have passed. Okay, now unwrap the cellophane. Stop. Write down your feelings and emotion. Okay, now take out the first cigarette, smell it. Tap it 3 times, whatever smokers do. Stop. Think about what you're feeling about that cigarette, what cravings you're experiencing, what other thoughts. Write them down. Okay, take out your lighter. Stop. And this went on for over an hour. The poor guys were sitting there anticipating their highly coveted smoke, first one of the day, and they had to go through this understanding their urge, understanding their craving, but not acting on it. And what the researchers found is that later, as time progressed, the level of craving actually subsided. And at the end of the hour, they were not on edge anymore, and they were not craving that cigarette as much as they did at the beginning of the hour. And they repeated this study many times, and based on these studies, they've developed that concept of surfing the urge. Namely, neurologically, that reward anticipation activity that's happening in the prefrontal cortex, as we saw, with the dopamine neurons, is transient. It takes a certain amount of time and then it dissipates. And so, if you wait it out, you surf the urge, that expectation, that craving will dissipate with time. 15% of the control group stopped smoking a year after that experiment, whereas the people who actually participated in the experiment, 35% of them were not smoking just due to the surf the urge exercise a year later. So it was definitely a potent intervention to go through. And Sarah Bowen actually produced an MP3 recording of the Surf the Urge meditation, where she guides you through this exercise. At the end of the presentation, I have a resources slide with a link to her free MP3 recording if you want to try it. So how can you use it? And again, I'll jump straight to the organizational level. How can you use this at the organizational level? And I'll bring back the same example of unruly meetings. But you can really extrapolate and take it to any level of the organization and any types of cravings, if you like. And that is, let's say, again, your meetings are unruly. People are jumping into each other's speeches, and the meeting is rendered very ineffective by this. So the objective is to stop that urge to jump into the conversation and express whatever your thoughts, whatever your opinion might be. So you institute a new ruling and appoint a meeting marshal to enforce it. Before you want to speak, anyone has to raise their hand. The meeting chair or marshal will wait maybe 5, 10, 15 seconds before they award that person the right to speak. Meanwhile, you'll ask the person to think about his inner experiences. What is going inside his mind at the moment? Is he sympathizing with the current speaker or not? Is he respecting the current speaker or disagreeing with him or her? Does he have value to contribute into the conversation, or does he merely want to express his own opinion just for his self-gratification. And what you will find is after 15 seconds of this kind of inner deliberation, you'll find that the number of requests to speak, to express your opinion, is dropping down, and the value of the contribution to your meetings and conversations is increasing. Because those people who merely wanted to speak because they want to express their self, their ego, without anything to contribute to the conversation, that will drop because they are surfing their urge. So the last one I want to share with you is the accountability partner. This is a study that goes back to 1993, Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. And what researchers did there in the survey is they took 5 groups of students who all shared the same goal. The first group, they've asked them, do you agree that this goal is a good idea? And of course they agreed, and they said, okay, write it down. This goal is a good idea for me to pursue. The second group, in addition to the first item, they said, are you committed to pursuing this goal? Seriously, focused on it. Yes, I am. Okay, write this down. The third group, they've asked them, in addition to the first 2 items, please produce a due date and a plan of exactly step by step how you're going to meet your goal. And write it down. Group number 4, they said, please send an email or a letter or some note to either a family member, or today it will be Facebook or wherever, publicize your intent to achieve this goal. And the 5th group, they said, seek an accountability partner, somebody that will support you in achieving your goal. And this is what they found. The first group, they just wrote down, yeah, it's a good idea, this goal. Only 15% of them actually achieved the goal. The last group, who worked with an accountability partner, 95% of those students achieved their goal. So the power of working with an accountability partner, I wanted to say is immeasurable, but it is actually very measurable. So how would we use this intervention on a personal level? Of course, we can ask a family member, a trusted advisor, somebody whom we respect, somebody who cares about us and has our well-being in mind, but also somebody strong who will have the fortitude to hold us to account in case of lapses in our willpower. And then you describe the goal to this person and you start working with the person, and they will be sure to really hold you accountable in case of lapses. At the organizational level, same thing. You can get your team together once you've decided on whatever it is the goal you want to achieve. Again, a mentor, a facilitator, somebody that the team respects, but also somebody that will be able to stand up to the team and hold them to account. And you will be amazed to see the very demonstrable, measurable impact of working with an accountability partner. And this person should not be the team's line manager, the regular day-to-day boss. This should be an external person from either from within the company or an outside coach or whoever you choose to use for this function. So this brings us to the end of the 6 interventions. And with that, I think we are at 11:15, right on time. So I'd like to thank you very much for time and attention, and I hope that this was of some value and interest to you.
Thank you.